Hello friends, welcome to today's lecture on question banks. We'll do question banks from UWorld. So let's start. In this question, the age-adjusted mortality trends for 5 cancers in women in the United States are shown in the graph below. Please note the point mortality. So that is the mortality trends cancer graph. Further, the question asks which of the following curves best corresponds to lung cancer. So the curve A best corresponds to the lung cancer. Lung cancer has been the leading cause of cancer mortality in both women and men in the United States. Tobacco use, primary and second hand, is the most common cause of the lung cancer, particularly the non-small cell lung cancer. Female use of cigarettes peaked in 1955 and mortality rate thus increased 20 to 50 years after smoking onset. Lung cancer mortality began to decrease after 2000, corresponding to a decline in tobacco use. Tobacco is a causative factor for numerous other cancers, example leukemia, nasopharyngeal, larynx, esophagus, pancreas, cervix, colon. It is directly carcinogenic to tissue by causing irritation and inflammation of the body's natural protective barrier. Patient education about tobacco's harmful effect is extremely important as smoking cessation for even long-time users can be beneficial for reducing cancer risk and improving life expectancy. Other options were incorrect because the choice B was the graph for the breast cancer, which is the most common non-skin cancer and the second most common cause of cancer death among women in the United States. Mortality from breast cancer began to decrease in the 1990s. Increased use of adjuvant chemotherapy and or radiation and more frequent breast cancer screening are likely contributing factors to this decline. The graph C indicates the colon cancer mortality, which has decreased since the 1950s due to advances in surgical technique and adjuvant chemotherapy. Additional protective factors may include colorectal cancer screening, menopausal hormone therapy in women, and aspirin use. The graph D indicates the incidence and mortality of pancreatic cancer, which have increased in women over the last century and recently become the fourth most common cause of cancer death in women. Pancreatic cancer trends like those of lung cancer follow the pattern of increased smoking in women. However, lung cancer is responsible for 3 times more death than pancreatic cancer in women. In the graph E shows the stomach cancer incidence and mortality decreased drastically over the first half of the 20th century. Proposed reasons include advances in refrigeration and food preservation, leading to decreased salt intake and better sanitation and more adequate housing, reducing H. pylori infection rates. So in summary, between 1950 and 2000, rising rates of tobacco use resulted in an increase in female lung cancer incidence and mortality. Lung cancer is currently the most common cause of cancer death in both men and women in the United States. Do remember this. This table demonstrates the cancer in US populations from 2008 to 2012. The highest incidence for female is breast cancer, second lung, then third colon, fourth uterus, and fifth thyroid, whereas highest mortality cancers include first lung, then the breast, then colon, fourth pancreas, and then ovary. For males, the highest incidence cancers include prostate, lung, colon, bladder, melanoma, whereas highest mortality cancers are firstly the lung, then the prostate, then colon, then the pancreas, and then bladder. Now this graph shows the United States cancer mortality for males. The first and the foremost comes the lungs. Then this red line shows the prostate. The green one demonstrates the colon. The fourth one demonstrates the pancreas, this blue, light blue. And then the stomach is for this declining one, orange color. Now this slide indicates the graph showing the United States cancer mortality for females. This purple line indicates the lung cancer, which had a sharp peak between 1990 to 2010 due to increase in tobacco use, whereas the breast and the colon cancer are seen to be decreasing due to the advance in surgical techniques and adjuvant chemotherapy. The breast cancer is the red line and the colon cancer is the light green line, whereas the pancreatic cancer, which is this light bluish line, is also increasing with increase of tobacco use but has comparatively low mortality rate than lung cancer. Then the last one is the sharp declining stomach cancer demonstrated by this orange line. The stomach cancer has been decreasing due to increased hygienic measures and proper refrigeration advancing. A 44-year-old woman comes to the office due to indigestion and she develops right upper quadrant abdominal discomfort and nausea after fatty meals, which subside spontaneously in several hours. She does not use tobacco, alcohol, or illicit drugs. The patient immigrated to the US from Nepal 10 years ago. Abdominal ultrasound reveals numerous gallstones. She undergoes elective laparoscopic cholecystectomy. The stones in her gallbladder has very low cholesterol content and appear small, dark and speculated. Which of the following conditions most likely predisposed this patient to gallstone formation? Since the gallstones were very small, dark and speculated with very low cholesterol content, this itself indicates that this is due to chronic hemolysis and not due to metabolic syndrome or any other cause. Now, the gallstones are formed by the aggregation of bile constituents and they are characterized as cholesterol stones, pigment stones, or mixed stones. Now, the pigment gallstones account for only 10 to 25% in US, but it is most common in rural Asian populations. Now, they can either be brown to black and they arise from conditions that increase the amount of unconjugated bilirubin in bile, which promotes the calcium bilirubinate precipitation. Now, the brown one are associated with the biliary tract infections, the microbes which produce beta glucuronidases, whereas the black stones occur in the setting of chronic hemolysis. Example, the sickle cell anemia, the beta thalassemia, and the hereditary spherocytosis. And then there is increased enterohepatic cycling of bilirubin due to some ileal disease. Grossly, if we see, then the black pigment stones usually present in significant numbers and are small, speculated and friable because these stones contain high amount of calcium carbonates and phosphates. They are often radiopaque and they appear on X-ray. The choices B, C, D and E were incorrect because obesity, metabolic syndrome and multiparity, oral contraceptive use and rapid weight loss are significant risk factors for development of cholesterol gallstones. All in summary is that the black pigment stones arise from conditions that increase the amount of unconjugated bilirubin in bile, which promotes calcium bilirubinate precipitation, and they may occur in the setting of chronic hemolysis, example sickle cell anemia, beta thalassemia, or hereditary spherocytosis, and in conditions where there is increased enterohepatic cycling of bilirubin due to some ileal disease. Now, this slide demonstrates the pathogenesis of pigment stones. Here are the black stones and here is the brown stones. As we can see that the black stones are small, more in numbers and speculated as compared to the brown stones which are large. The black stones are caused due to chronic hemolysis or increased enterohepatic cycling of bilirubin that cause increased unconjugated bilirubin in the bloodstream. Now, next, the brown stones are caused due to biliary tract infections from microbes such as E. coli and liver fluke, which release microbial beta glucuronidases. again which leads ultimately to the increased unconjugated bilirubin. Now this increased unconjugated bilirubin leads to the calcium bilirubinate precipitation, finally leading to formation of stones. Now, in this question, a 55-year-old man undergoing evaluation for fatigue and exertional dyspnea is diagnosed with macrocytic anemia. Upper GIT endoscopy is consistent with atrophic gastritis. He is started on intramuscular cyanocobalamin with the resulting changes shown in the graph below. So in the graph we can see since the start of the treatment, the graph is rising a bit to a high peak and then declining, and then it's becoming stable. Further, the question asks that the blue curve most likely corresponds to which of the following parameters. So the answer is reticulocyte count E. This is because the graph shows the treatment response to vitamin B12 in a patient with vitamin B12 deficiency, which is secondary to atrophic gastritis. Vitamin B12 deficiency impairs the nucleic acid metabolism, causing delayed nuclear maturation and reduced cell division of erythrocyte precursors in the bone marrow, which is how it leads to megaloblastic anemia. Once vitamin B12 replacement therapies begin, erythrocyte precursors begin to change from megaloblastic to normoblastic. As the rate of effective erythropoiesis increases, immature erythrocytes or the reticulocytes are released from the bone marrow into the bloodstream. The peripheral count of these reticulocytes begins rising within 3 to 4 days and then it peaks at around 1 week as indicated by the blue curve. The reticulocyte response peaks early during vitamin replacement as the reticulocytes are initially released, are left shifted, and take longer to mature in the circulation than later reticulocytes. However, hemoglobin levels are slower to rise and the anemia typically takes as long as 8 weeks to correct. In the other options, in choice A, the erythrocyte count curve would be expected to follow the contour of the hemoglobin curve as the total RBC pool returns to normal levels. Hence, it was not appropriate. In choice B, this was the case of chronic atrophic gastritis. The parietal cell loss results in profound hypochlorhydria and increased serum gastrin levels and inadequate intrinsic factor production. The patient most likely has elevated gastrin levels that would be affected by or that would be unaffected by vitamin B12 replacement. Thus, it was not appropriate. In choice C, vitamin B12 deficiency cause increased red cell breakdown due to ineffective erythropoiesis and the resulting release of free hemoglobin leads to a decrease in serum haptoglobin level. So the haptoglobin levels would normalize or increase with therapy but will not follow the pattern as shown in the graph. Thus, it was not appropriate. In choice D, homocysteine and methylmalonic acid levels are elevated in vitamin B12 deficiency due to decreased metabolism. In contrast, only homocysteine is elevated in folate deficiency. Vitamin B12 replacement would cause a reduction in homocysteine and methylmalonic acid levels. However, the blue curve shows a high initial peak before declining, which is more consistent with the reticulocyte response. In total or in summary, atrophic gastritis can result in profound hypochlorhydria, inadequate intrinsic factor production, vitamin B12 deficiency, and elevated methylmalonic acid levels. The reticulocyte count increases dramatically once vitamin B12 replacement therapy is initiated in an individual with pernicious anemia. Now, in this case, a 15-year-old boy is brought to the emergency department due to hemoptysis. He has a history of amputation of the right lower extremity for bone cancer in Mexico. Chest imaging reveals a lung mass. Excisional biopsy of the mass shows sheets of uniform, small, slightly larger than lymphocytes, round cells with scant clear cytoplasm. The cellular deposits are interrupted by vascular fibrous septae with areas of hemorrhage and an abrupt transition from viable to necrotic cells. Our representative sample is shown in the image. So, which of the following is the most likely diagnosis? The most likely diagnosis here is Ewing sarcoma. Ewing sarcoma epidemiology is that it is mesenchymal stem cell neoplasm, which is primarily seen in children or young adults, and the site of origin is mostly the long bones, exoskeleton, or pelvis. Manifestations include localized pain and swelling, early metastasis to lung and other bones, and histopathology shows sheets of uniform small round cells separated by fibrous septae, scant or clear cytoplasm with heavy glycogen content, then areas of hemorrhage and necrosis, and rare mitotic figures. This boy with a history of bone cancer has a lung tumor with sheets of uniform small round cells, raising strong suspicion for metastatic Ewing sarcoma. Ewing sarcoma is the second most common childhood bone malignancy after osteosarcoma and typically presents with pain and swelling at the bone tumor site. Spread to the lungs or other tissue can occur in those who don't undergo both resection and chemotherapy. Ewing sarcoma is a primitive, undifferentiated tumor that was originally thought to be neuroectodermal in origin but is now believed to arise from mesenchymal stem cell. Tumor histology typically reveals sheets of uniform small round cells with clear scant cytoplasm separated by fibrous septae and patches of necrosis or hemorrhages. This appearance resembles the neuroendocrine tumors such as carcinoid and small lung cancer. Most cases of ES involve translocations of EWSR1 and FLI1. In choice A, adenocarcinoma, the most primary lung malignancy, often metastasized to bone. However, the histopathology would have shown neoplastic glands lined by mucin producing cells. Thus, it was inappropriate. Chondrosarcoma is an uncommon tumor and typically occurs in the 5th or 6th decade of life. Histology shows neoplastic chondrocytes in hyaline cartilage matrix, usually with small calcification. Hence, it was not the answer. Multiple myeloma is a plasma cell malignancy that is extremely rare in patients less than 40 years of age. X-ray often shows multiple lytic lesions, osteopenia, and pathologic fractures. The malignant cells have eccentric nuclei with clock face chromatin, perinuclear clearing, and abundant basophilic cytoplasm. Thus was not appropriate. Osteosarcoma is the most common primary bone malignancy. Histology would have shown pleomorphic spindle-shaped cells that produce new osteoid and bone. In all, the summary is that the Ewing sarcoma is the second most common malignant bone tumor of childhood after osteosarcoma. It most commonly involves the lower extremity and pelvis and often metastasizes to the lungs. Histopathology is characterized by uniform, small round cells separated by fibrous septae and presenting with some patches of necrosis and hemorrhage. A 59-year-old manager of a small firm complains of fatigue and occasional heart palpitations. She has been under a lot of stress due to work problems and she's now also been eating out at restaurants frequently and drinks 2 to 3 cans of beer. The patient is postmenopausal and she does not notice any uterine bleeding, dark stools, or bleeding with bowel movements. Her blood hemoglobin is 8.5 gram per deciliter. Blood smear reveals pale microcytes. Which of the following is the most likely underlying cause of this patient's abnormal lab findings? So the patient is suffering from microcytic hypochromic anemia, and she being postmenopausal and having eating a lot in restaurants and drinking 2 or 3 cans of beer should be examined for GI blood loss. Even though she is not noticing, it could be the cause, or it could be occult blood loss where the blood is abnormally present, example in feces, but is detected only chemically or microscopically. Fatigue and heart palpitation are common manifestations of all forms of anemia, and the patient's peripheral smear indicate hypochromic microcytic anemia, which is most often arise with setting of iron deficiency. The primary and most dangerous if overlooked mechanism of iron deficiency is blood loss, and this should be excluded first. Women of childbearing age are commonly iron deficient due to menstruation. Older men or postmenopausal women, as this patient, have no physiologic reason to be iron deficient and they should be evaluated for blood loss in the GIT tract. This could be due to malignancy. The blood loss is often occult, so the lack of dark or bright red stools in this patient should not rule out that she does not have GI hemorrhage. Iron studies including ferritin should be obtained, and the patient will likely require endoscopic evaluation. The other options were inappropriate, as in choice A. Ingestion of the more commonly abused drugs is not associated with microcytic anemia. In choice B, hematologic malignancies, example leukemia, lymphoma, multiple myeloma, tend to be associated with normocytic normochromic anemia. The decrease in erythropoiesis seen in this patient results from hypersplenism or bone marrow mass replacement by the tumor, hence it was not appropriate. In choice C, hemolysis often presents with normochromic normocytic anemia. Spherocytes or schistocytes are often seen on peripheral blood smear, hence it was not appropriate. The anemia of chronic liver disease is usually normocytic or slightly macrocytic with target cells on the peripheral blood smear. Microcytic anemia occurs in less than 25% of cases, and most patients only have mild anemia and a hemoglobin of 10 to 11 gram per deciliter. Hence, it is also not appropriate. In choice F, eating out and drinking a few beers on weekends are not suggestive of the severe malnutrition seen in alcoholics. A normal Western diet provides 6 mg of iron for every 1000 calories, and the recommended intake for the individuals of age greater than 50 is 8 mg per day. As a result, men and women who are not menstruating or pregnant or lactating usually have no dietary iron shortage. In this question, a 72-year-old man comes to the office due to progressive weakness, fatigue, anorexia, and a 10 kg of weight loss over the past 4 months. He says that food doesn't taste as good as it once did, and he feels full after eating only a small amount. The patient has had a morning cough for the past several years and had streaks of blood in his sputum 2 weeks ago. He has a 50-pack year smoking history. On examination, the patient appears frail with a sunken face and bitemporal wasting. His arms are thin and notable muscle wasting can be seen. Lung examination reveals wheezing on the right side. Chest X-ray reveals an irregular right perihilar mass. Which of the following is most likely contributing to the patient's muscle wasting? So the muscle wasting is mainly due to tumor necrosis factor alpha. Cachexia is a syndrome that encompasses anorexia, malaise, anemia, weight loss, and generalized wasting due to underlying systemic disease. Cachexia in this patient is likely a manifestation of the lung neoplasm revealed on his chest X-ray. Tumor necrosis factor alpha is a cytokine that causes necrosis of some tumors in vitro and produces symptoms of cachexia in experimental animals. Tumor necrosis factor alpha is also called cachectin and is considered a main mediator of paraneoplastic cachexia along with interleukin 1 beta and interleukin 6. Tumor necrosis factor alpha is produced by macrophages in response to infection as well as by some neoplastic cells. Its role in cachexia is explained by its influence on the hypothalamus leading to appetite suppression. It also increases basal metabolic rate. In bacterial infections, tumor necrosis factor alpha produces fever along with interleukin 1, mediates many of the symptoms of septic shock, and causes hepatic release of acute phase reactants, example C-reactive protein and fibrinogens. Other options were incorrect, as in choice A. Eaton-Lambert syndrome is a paraneoplastic condition that manifests as progressive symmetric proximal muscle weakness rather than wasting, along with ocular and autonomic symptoms. It is due to autoantibodies to voltage-gated calcium channels. In choice B, interferon alpha is synthesized by leukocytes and has antiviral as well as anti-tumor activity. In choice C, interleukin 3 is produced by activated CD4 plus T helper cells. It stimulates growth and differentiation of myeloid cells. In choice D, the main function of transforming growth factor beta is inhibition of the inflammatory response. It decreases T cell proliferation and cytokine production. In choice F, production of vasopressin by some tumors, example small lung cancer, results in the syndrome of inappropriate antidiuretic hormone secretion. So in summary, the tumor necrosis factor alpha is thought to mediate paraneoplastic cachexia in humans by suppressing appetite and increasing basal metabolic rate. This is all for today. Thanks for watching. If you like this video, please do subscribe and share.